So, welcome back. We have discussed a lot about social entrepreneurship, social businesses, and new business models. We have discussed this in seminars, but also today here in the lecture. And now, as I said, we have a guest speaker who is actually running a social business himself. And I won't talk about Kipepeo because Martin can tell us all about the history behind this and how he became a social entrepreneur. And I really think that after having discussed all the theoretical background on the topic, there will be a lot of interesting questions that we can discuss with Martin. Thank you so much for coming. Martin has been here already once at the CSR weekend. Is there somebody who has seen his talk already? No, perfect. So it's new for everybody. Thank you very much for coming.
Talk anyway, so.
Yeah, okay.
So, can you hear me properly? Yes? Okay, because this is a bit unfamiliar like this. Okay, thank you very much for having me again. As Laura said, I've been here last year in November, I think, sometimes around that time of the year. And I was giving a workshop where we talked about the textile supply chain, in our case, the textile supply chain in Tanzania. Today, my lecture is going to be a bit different. It's about social entrepreneurship, about friendship, and about T-shirts, actually. So my name is Martin, as already said, and I'm the founder of a company called Kipepeo Clothing. Kipepeo Clothing is supporting schools and education in East Africa, in Tanzania exactly. We do this by manufacturing, printing, and selling organic shirts that are 100% sourced and manufactured in Tanzania. So from the cotton that we receive from local small farmer corporations to the finished garments, the whole manufacturing chain takes place in East Africa. We are the only German company that is doing this, and we are the second. There are only 2 companies in Europe that are manufacturing in Tanzania as well. The unique aspect of Kipepeo are the designs. All designs are actually created during primary school lessons at primary schools in Tanzania. So for example, if the topic of the science class is animals of the Serengeti, the children in the age between 5 and 13 years old then draw tiny designs of elephants, giraffes, or monkeys in their exercise books. So this is the reason why this monkey is looking out of my kitenge pocket, which is made out of an traditional East African fabric. We sell the T-shirts online on markets and to retail, and a part of the revenue is going back to the school where the design was actually created. The donations are used for school fees, stationery, and even for building new school buildings. Kipepeo means butterfly in Swahili, the language spoken in Tanzania and Kenya. So that's the reason why the butterfly is located on our logo, where you find Tanzania on the African continent. If you read articles about Kipepeo, and there have been a lot in the last years, you sometimes read about the butterfly effect. But when I found Kipepeo, that wasn't the reason why I gave that unique project that name. During the last years, we just adopted that metaphor because I thought it suits the project quite well. So I'm going to tell you why I call that company actually Kipepeo. Oh, sorry. I just see there's one missing. Tanzania is on the African continent, and you find it in the eastern part of Africa. It borders to Kenya and Uganda in the north, Rwanda, Burundi in the west, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia in the east, Malawi and in the west, and Malawi and Mozambique in the south. Tanzania is still one of the poorest countries in the world. It has like 52 million people, and 68% and 62% live under an average living wage of 100,000 Tanzanian shillings a month, which is like 50 euros a month. 44% of the population in Tanzania are under the age of 14. Tanzania is a very diverse country. There are 140 different ethnics and 100 different languages spoken. But all the people are united in one common language, which is the Swahili. The most important economic sectors in Tanzania is mining, the tourism sector, and agriculture. Tanzania became independent in the year 1961 and was united with Zanzibar in the year of 1994. So Tanzania is actually the name of the mainland Tanganyika, the island of Zanzibar, and Azania, which is the geographical description for all countries under the sub-Sahara line. In the year 2008, that's actually the year when the story of Kipepeo began. I was working in a German wholesales company, and I was a miserable person who didn't like his job at all. I was just sitting in my office and stared at the computer one day when one of my best friends gave me a phone call. And I answered the phone, and he was like, "Martin, do you remember lately when you told me that you're a miserable person who doesn't like his job at all?" I was like, "Well, yes, thanks for the reminder. What can I do for you?" So Tim continued, and he said, "We are a group of 5 students studying social work in Stuttgart, and we want to go to Tanzania. Would you be up for joining us?" I was like, "Well, what am I going to do in Tanzania? We're going to work in different social projects. So in your case, you should go and work in an orphanage for HIV-infected children." So I thought, okay, I don't know. What do I know about Tanzania? Tanzania is somewhere in the east of Africa. The Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa, is in Tanzania. Lion King took place in Tanzania. And one of the famous musicians of our time came from Tanzania. If you don't know who that was, Faruk Bulsara escaped Zanzibar in the year of 1964 during the revolution against the Sultan. And he became roadie of a band in England, which was called Smile. When that band split, he formed a new band with their guitar player Brian May and became world famous as Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen. So I thought, Kilimanjaro, Lion King, Freddie Mercury. These are 3 pretty good reasons why I should go to Tanzania. So I basically quit my job the same day. I went to my boss and told him that I'm going to leave the country and I'm going to spend the next 6 months in Tanzania to work as a primary school teacher. I quit my job, and 1 month later I was sitting in a plane heading to Tanzania. When I went there, everything was pretty exciting, as you can imagine. I was full of energy, and I went to that small orphanage in the outskirts of Arusha town. And I spent the whole day there. And it was really interesting. But in the end of the day, I was asking at what time I should come the next day to continue my work. And they looked at me, and they were like, "What are you going to do here tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm supposed to work here for the next 6 months. So is there anything to do?" And they were like, "No, actually there's nothing to do here because all the children, they're in foster homes just around Arusha town. So there's basically nothing you can do." So I said, okay, that doesn't make too much sense at all, and I was pretty disappointed. So I went outside and I just started walking around town. Back then, Arusha, which is located in the north of Tanzania, just in the middle between the Kilimanjaro and the Serengeti, back then was kind of a small town. It had 365,000 people there and one ATM on the main road. These days, Tanzania is one of the fastest growing cities in East Africa and a hub city with about 1.8 million people and 12 ATMs on the same road. So I was walking through town when I stopped at the church. And there was just lots of clapping and singing, and I was walking in there because it was pretty exciting, just sneaking in the last row and sat down. And suddenly all of the people turned around, and I sat there like, oh, okay, I just keep quiet and put down my head. And I listened to the ceremony, and at the end, one of the guys from the church choir came to me and he asked me, "What are you doing here?" And I told him my story, that I was supposed to work in Tanzania for the next month, but I literally have nothing to do. So I'm kind of lost. And he said, "Well, me and my wife, we founded a little primary school in the outskirts of Arusha, in the district called Ola City. And we are looking for someone who could maybe help the teachers by correcting class tests and something. Would you be up for doing this? And I thought, okay, so why not? So I went there and stayed there for the next month. Before I came to Tanzania, my flight went. I went to Tanzania on the 2nd of January, and so for Christmas, my sister gave me a diary, and she gave it to me, and she said, "Martin, take this diary so that you can write down all the impressions you will have in Tanzania." And I had this really romantic picture of myself sitting somewhere in my little hut in the outskirts of Arusha and writing down meaningful quotes. And years later, I just open the diary and I look in there and I'm like, oh my God, you're an awesome person. But it didn't happen because I'm a really, really horrible writer. Really, really horrible. But there's something I'm kind of good in, and I always loved when I was younger, and that is drawing. So I spent most of the time during the school lessons, during the school breaks, sitting on the schoolyard and making little portraits of the children when they were jumping around and doing stuff. And the children always came to me the next day and looked in the diary what I had drawn, and they started to draw things in the diary by themselves. One of the pupils, her name was Abigail. By then she was 7 years old. Now she's almost 17. We still meet every year. It's kind of weird seeing her like being this tall now. She was somehow one of my favorite pupils because I think she reminded me a lot of myself when I was in school. She didn't really like school at all. She preferred playing outside. She was on the schoolyard, pushing the boys, and didn't pay too much attention in school lessons. And I really liked her a lot. And we had the same way to school. So we don't even share the same way. We also shared a lot of stories. And when it came to rain season, it was at the beginning of March. One morning I was walking to school, and there's no paved road that is going to Maxim's primary school. It's just like a dirt road, and when the rain season started, it became really muddy and it's kind of slippy and it's really hard to walk on there. And Abigail has a sister, her name is Glory, and she's suffering on a disease of her spine. So now she's sitting in a wheelchair, but back then she couldn't barely walk. And Abigail and her friend Neema, she went to her home every morning and picked her up and basically carried her on their shoulders to school during the rain seasons. And I saw that one morning, and I was really, I didn't really know what to say because she was kind of heavy. And I thought, okay, why is there no one who could help them? So I started going to Glory's house every morning and picked her up together with Abigail, and we carried her to school together. And so we became quite close friends with her family and Glory and Abigail. So till now. I stayed at Maxton School for some months, and then when it was time to leave to Germany, there was a big party they organized. And we all met and we had dinner together, and I took Abigail by the hand and I told her that it's time for me to leave, that I'm going to head back to Germany. Or before I went back to Germany, I was traveling through to Central Africa down to Cape Town to make my way home. And she looked at me and she didn't really understand what I was saying, I think. And then she took my diary. Back then, as today, like almost, I was carrying the diary in the pocket of a cargo pant I bought in the year 2008. I'm just saying that because I think it's kind of a hilarious story, because since 10 years I'm always wearing that same pant when I go to Tanzania, and the principals of the school already bought me 2 new pants because they said they can't see me in that old pant going there. So she knew that the diary was in there, and she took it out and she was running away, and I was standing there thinking, oh my God, it's like a month of remembrance of my time in Tanzania are gone in the arms of a crying child. Well, this is probably the way it has to be. It could be worse. But a few minutes later, Abigail came back, and she gave me the diary. She gave me a hug. We said goodbye, And I left Maxent School to leave to Dar es Salaam in the morning. The next morning I was sitting in the bus to Dar es Salaam in order to make it to Malawi the next day. I was in the early morning hours. And I was just sitting there and listening to music and flipping through my diary and looked at all the pictures I was drawing in the last month. And suddenly a little envelope fell out of that diary. It was an envelope that was folded out of a ripped off page of an exercise book. And there was a small letter that Abigail wrote to me, and the design, this design. So Abigail tried to actually portrait herself or myself, I'm not quite sure, and she can't really remember, as I asked her this question like 100 times the last years. But back then, as today, this still moved me a lot. And I came back to Germany and printed that design on a t-shirt just to have a constant reminder at the time in Tanzania that is something different than a carved giraffe out of wood or something like that. When I was back in Germany, I started studying business administration on second chance education on the weekends. And to pay my school fees, I was working on the construction side. And I was staying in touch with the principals of the school and Abigail's parents and many other people from Tanzania when I found out that Abigail's parents couldn't afford her school fees anymore. School fees at a private school in Tanzania are quite cheap for us. It's like $30 a month, which is not that much. So I was doing some extra shifts on the construction side and sent the money to Abigail's parents, but I thought, okay, there must be something more sustainable. There must be a more sustainable way to support the child, because I actually can't work on the construction side my whole life, and I can't do extra shifts my whole life. So I already was thinking about doing something, but I wasn't really sure what I should do. And then there was this one weekend. It was at some point in November, I think. Me and my friends, we went skiing. Skiing in Austria, or like you go skiing in Austria, especially when you go to the town called Ischgl. It was one of those days where you don't ski too much, or at least I didn't ski too much. And I was sitting in a pub waiting for my friends to return, as we had to go home the same day. And I was sitting there, and I decided to have a glass of mulled wine, and I decided to have another one. And after a while, it was getting kind of hot in there. So I put off my sweatshirt, and I was sitting there with my t-shirt, when the waiter came to me, and he looked at me and he was like, "What kind of t-shirt is this?" And he was asking that question not in a way like, you're a 25-year guy wearing a weird t-shirt with some potato head person, whatever. It was more like, I'm interested in the story behind that t-shirt, tell it to me. So I told him to sit down, and I told him the story like I told you now. And he went back and got another glass of mulled wine for me. And put 100 euros on the table and said, I give you these 100 euros if you promise me to give that money to the child who created the design, and I get your t-shirt. And I said, that sounds like a good deal for me, but I don't have another t-shirt so far, but I promise I'm going to print another one for you, and I'm send it to you. And he was like, okay, so you need a name for your brand, because it's obviously a brand, isn't it? And I was like, I have no idea about brands or fashion or whatever. I would think about it. So I went home the same evening, and I was stumbling in my apartment, taking my diary, which was always an inspiration during that time, opened it, and the first word written in there was the name Kipepeo, written by one of the children. So it's actually on our logo, it's the exact handwriting of that kid. Her name is Shania, and she did it in the year 2008. So this should become the name of a social business that I was going to form, or back then it was more, let's call it, a side project. It's pretty hot in here. So I tried to start a business, or at least it was some sort of a project. I wouldn't call it a business. So maybe since 3 years, I would call it actually like a proper running company that is also employing people. Back then, I started Kipepeo with 50 euros, a heat transfer press that I bought on eBay, and 10 plain white t-shirts. I printed other designs on the t-shirts, like the elephant design and the Kilimanjaro design, which should be like the first 3 designs of our very, very modest first collection. I thought it's really hard to get some sort of popularity or to spread the word or to get a podium to tell the people about my experience in Tanzania. So what could you do? And I was chatting with one of my best friends. His name is Sam and he's from England. And I met him that same year in South Africa. And he said, come on, it's been a year since we met last. Let's just do something. Let's go traveling around Europe and you get some t-shirts. And wherever we go, we just give the t-shirts to people and ask them to make photographs of themselves in front of specific landmarks of their hometowns or countries, like the Colosseum of Rome or the Eiffel Tower in Paris, or the Brandenburger Tor in Berlin, for example. So Sam came to Germany. We printed a lot of t-shirts, sat in the Skoda of my parents, and were driving across Europe for like 6 months. And after that, for like 6 weeks. And after that 6 weeks, we had lots of pictures of Kipepeo shirts all over the world, and suddenly our Facebook page had like 2,000 followers, even though we didn't really have like a proper product to sell. It was just like those t-shirts we printed in the beginning. So I started to learn like a bit of programming, and I started to make an online shop. And things were kind of going slow, but for the first month we really sold kind of a lot of t-shirts. So we were able to afford the school fees for Abigail, Vanessa, Daniel and Ebenezer for a whole year in 4 months. So that was kind of a big success. Back then, suddenly our tiny apartment in Stuttgart somehow became like a warehouse for t-shirts. It was all covered with boxes and t-shirts, and my flatmate was going kind of crazy that day, these times, because when you walked in there, you were just like looking on walls full of boxes and shirts hanging all around. And I was starting in like a proper job, as Kipepeo was still like a side project, just running, and I was kind of tired of working on the construction side, and I finished studying. And so I was working. So I started working in a sales and marketing agency in Stuttgart for the next 4 years, and was running Kipepeo on the side. And as Kipepeo was growing constantly, we were also looking for different printing techniques. I was attending a startup contest in the year 2012, and we made the second rank and won like 3,000 euro that we invested in renting a silkscreen printing area in a free artists workspace, somehow like that. And so we went there like every night. When we went there first, we thought, okay, screen printing, this is the way you do it. It's just pretty simple. If you look on those YouTube videos, you just print a t-shirt and then you sell it. It's kind of easy thing to do. It doesn't take like 1.5 hours if you do it by heat transfer press. So we went there very optimistic the first time with like 100 t-shirts and our YouTube tutorials. And 6 months later, we sold our very first silk screen printed t-shirt. So this was kind of an effort, because screen printing is a really, really hard thing to do. And we agreed that this is basically something we can't do on our own, because back then I had a regular 40-hour work week. And with the work for Kipepeo, like printing and administration, I worked like, I don't know, 70 to 80 hours every week, and every Saturday and Sunday. And that lasted till like 3 years ago. So this is probably the curse of an entrepreneur people are not often talk about, but it's kind of a really, really hard thing to do. The more I learned about textiles, or let's say as soon as I like tipped my toe in the textile industry, I knew that there was only one way that we want to follow. If you hear about fast fashion in Europe or in Germany, or people talk about fast fashion, people are mostly talking about the conditions people in Bangladesh are working, and they are staying in fabrics that are collapsing, and they are working for really really horrible wage. But what people are actually not really talking about is what happens with all those garments when they are worn out. People are always talking about the fact how they are actually manufactured, but they don't talk about what happens with the garments when they are worn out. And this is one of the aspects when I first got in touch with manufacturers in East Africa. When you're in Tanzania, or let's say it doesn't matter in which part of East Africa you go, the pictures are mostly the same. If you go to Zambia, they call it Zalaula. If you go to Tanzania, they call it Mitumba. It's like big bales of second-hand clothing that are mostly collected for charity causes in Europe that find their way on East African markets. Back in the 60s, 70s, when Mitumba wasn't that common in Tanzania, they called it Kafa Ulaya. It's kind of funny because it's called, if you translate it to German, it's basically, if you translate it to English, it's basically dead white people clothes. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah, they find their way on East African markets. And as these second-hand garments are often made of better quality and much cheaper than local manufactured products, many manufacturers, particularly in Tanzania, they ran out of business because they couldn't keep up with the competition of those cheap imports. So it's a really hard thing to say, as it's a mixed blessing, as many Mitumba vendors are making their living by fixing, customizing, and selling those second-hand garments. And in Tanzania, you call it, as in Kenya, it's like the informal sector, which is kind of weird, as this so-called informal sector in Tanzania makes like 50% of the gross domestic product. Lately, there's a big discussion as the government changed in Tanzania, and Dr. John Magufuli is about to ban all the imports of second-hand clothing, where people could say, "Oh yes, that's a good thing because it's going to promote the local textile industry." But I think it's kind of hard to say if this will actually happen, because a ban of Mitumba garments doesn't mean that the local manufacturers are going to be promoted. I think it will be more beneficial to Asian retailers in particular. And on the other hand, what people don't think about at the moment is that the import tax of Mitumba clothes is about 20%, and there's another 25% of VAT. So this is just a huge amount of money that is missing. And as the population in Tanzania is constantly growing and they can't really afford new clothing, I don't think that Tanzanian manufacturers will be able, like in between 2 or 3 years, to like cover the demand of the market in terms of quality and quantity. So this is kind of a tough thing to do. But as I spent lots of time in Tanzania that days, and I was thinking, okay, if you support social projects in Tanzania, you should actually also support local manufacturers. And so we were looking for existing supply chains and thought, okay, let's just see what we can do there, and if it's actually possible, for example, to manufacture an organic product in Tanzania, and fair trade and organic product in Tanzania. What people often don't know is that Tanzania is like a textile country. Many of the fabrics fell into decline in the late 90s. That was the reason for this is not only the fact of the second-hand clothing imports. It's also it has also to do with the privatization of the factories back then. But Tanzania is indeed one of the most stable and peaceful countries in the developing world. They have 8 bordering markets that they can easily enter, as they are a member of the EAC, the East African Community, and the SADC, the South African Development Community. As they are also a member of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, Tanzania is also privileged to enter the US and the European market easily. Tanzania is the biggest producer, is among the 4 biggest producing countries of conventional cotton in Africa, and among the 7th, I think, biggest organic cotton producers in the world. The supply chain of our t-shirts actually starts in central Tanzania in Singida. Singida is one of 30 regions in Tanzania. You can compare it like to the German Bundesländer, and it's basically the one of the poorest regions in Tanzania. If you talk about cotton and the market share of organic cotton in particular, the world harvest amount of cotton is around like 25 million tons of cotton fibers a year, and less than 1% of this amount is made of organic cotton. The major producers are India, China, and the United States. And for organic cotton, it's India, China, Turkey, Kyrgyzstan, and the United States. And that top 5 countries manufacture 92.16% of all the organic cotton in the world, which is kind of crazy because on the world market, there's like a really huge amount, a huge demand for organic cotton, but it's not balanced among the producing countries. And so the market share Tanzania actually has is really, really modest at the moment. But if farmers would be encouraged by better cotton prices, for example, they would be able to double their cotton production, like they could double it in 1 year if you believe in the textile development unit. So last year we went to Tanzania to make a documentary about Kipepeo, and we were talking to cotton farmers, and we learned a lot about organic cotton. So I think the biggest advantage of growing cotton organically is that there are no chemicals and fertilizers used that could harm people and the environment. The focus lies on the enrichment of the soil and a proper water management. The farmers can also grow other field fruits beside growing cotton. So for example, if in one season the farmer says, okay, the world market price is just too low for me to plant cotton actually, I just go for that season and I just go and plant maize or rice or sweet potatoes. It depends if you're in the western cotton growing area in Tanzania or the eastern cotton growing area. Because of the returning rain seasons, there's actually no artificial watering needed in Tanzania, as the rain seasons, as the rain keeps the fields wet. After the cotton is being harvested, it's transported to a so-called cotton gin. This is very technical, but it's very interesting in terms of how processing and how inventions could actually change whole markets. In a few seconds you will see a video about the manufacturing process, and you will see that cotton gin, which is a machine that was invented in the year 1793 by an American called Eli Whitney. And it's really interesting in that place because during the textile industrial revolution in England, there were many inventions like the spinning jenny, the first weaving chair, or the water frame spinning machine. And as England was possible to manufacture lots of garments, the demand grew because garments became affordable for all the English population. And back then, England was mostly importing cotton from India, but they couldn't meet their demand anymore. So they were talking to the United States, as they are one of the biggest, or they always have one of the biggest cotton producers. but they also had the same problem. So back then there was a really young American engineer called Eli Whitney who was traveling the country. He was in the age of 21. And he was picked up by an American cotton farmer from Texas who told him about the problem they had. So he invented a machine that was able to divide the corn from the cotton fiber mechanically, which actually made slavery in America profitable, because the people didn't need to go, the people could go on the field and pick the cotton, and before that the slaves had to stay actually inside and had to divide the cotton fibers from the corns. It's a really interesting thing. So to give you a more visual picture how this actually looks like. No, sorry. So here you see one of the cotton farmers we are working with. And there are 4,500 cotton farmers in Singida area that grow cotton on 60,500 hectares certified organic farmland. They have an annual output of around 2,100 tons of cotton fibers a year, which is a decrease of 43% from the last year. So this is the cotton gin, where you see the machinery that is actually dividing the corn from the cotton. Then it's pressed to bales. And then transported on a very short way of around 320 kilometers to North Tanzania, to Arusha. So we go to the factory in the morning by motorbike, usually. And the unique aspect of Tanzania is, of manufacturing in Tanzania, is that you have a complete vertical textile manufacturing unit. That means every single step of manufacturing, like spinning, knitting and weaving. Here you see a 150 gram single jersey garment where our t-shirts are made of, takes place in one factory. They have an in-house wastewater management, fire extinguishers and evacuation plans on the walls, like in every unit. The people who work there get a fair living wage, free transportation and free health insurance, which is something you wouldn't expect in East Africa either. So after the t-shirts are manufactured, we bring them to Germany, not by plane, we bring them in containers by ships and print them in our own in-house screen printing unit in Stuttgart. We print there around like 2,500 shirts a month at the moment. And then you find us on different markets or in retail all around Germany selling Kipepeo t-shirts. So I just wanted to show you this because when people talk about textiles and especially about fair fashion and stuff, no one really knows how many people are actually involved in the manufacturing process of a kind of a product that looks kind of simple. We had that idea of like counting all the people involved in the manufacturing process in Tanzania, but that didn't work at all. We stopped like when we had, I don't know, the first day we had like 50 people or something. So we said, okay, that doesn't make too much sense to keep on counting. So now we are really happy that we have a holistic cycle that promotes fairness, ecology and health to all the people involved who are working for Kipepeo. You've already seen the cotton farming in Tanzania and the production of the t-shirts in Tanzania and the printing in Germany. So the next steps is actually selling the garments. The textile industry is really a shark tank, and if you want to employ yourself or if you want to start your own company with textiles, it is really, really hard to build a brand and to get into retail. especially as the margins for products you sell to retail are incredibly small. You can't make a living in the first years of selling your products to retail. This is something that we found out quite quickly, as there was a lot of attention and people were asking us many retailers were asking for our products. But after a while, we just stopped selling to retailers, and we now keep doing it again as we have much more, much higher demand for our t-shirts. So we were thinking, okay, there must be other reasons how we can actually sell our products to the people, or in the best case, as it is a Tanzanian product, and we aren't really able to sell our products in Tanzania as the manufacturing costs are incredibly high, and people who go to Tanzania usually they are paying like loads and loads of money for safaris and lodges and whatever. But if they're going to buy a product like a t-shirt on a local market or in a local store, they won't pay more than €5 or $5 because they think it's East Africa, it's supposed to be cheap. It's really horrible that people think this, but this is just the way it is, and this is something we found out. So we were thinking, okay, we want our t-shirts to be worn in Tanzania, but how can we actually do this without giving them to someone for free? So we were starting to talk to lots of safari companies in Arusha town. As Arusha is located just close to Mount Kilimanjaro and the Serengeti, basically every tourist who's going to Tanzania is going to Arusha and then doing his safari in the Ngorongoro crater, the Tarangire Park, or whatever. And so we were making cooperations with these safari companies that they just put the price of our t-shirts on their safaris actually, and we sent them. We stored some of our t-shirts in Tanzania, and if someone pays for a safari, he just pays like $20 more for a safari, which costs like $5,000. This is just like a small amount of money, and then he gets a Kipepeo shirt for free. So he has a product that is 100% made in Tanzania for a good cause, and he doesn't care too much because he's focusing more on the safari than on the actual product. And so this is one way how we got into the Tanzanian market. So if you are in the area around Arusha, you will see hopefully lots of people running around with Kipepeo shirts. There was one really funny story when one of the best friends of my girlfriend, when she came back from Tanzania, she was there for work, working in a hospital in Moshi, and she was learning Swahili. And in the beginning, she thought that because she was also doing like lots of hiking around Mount Kilimanjaro and whatever, and we have like 4 companies where we also made the t-shirts for the safari companies. So all the guides are wearing Kipepeo shirts, and they're always like, "Oh, Kipepeo, Kipepeo." And she said that this means something like, I don't know, t-shirt or whatever. So she told me when she was back, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of a nice story then." So what I wanted to say is we focus on corporations quite a lot, because as a young startup company, this is probably the only way to get into the market without having like a big investor, because we don't have any investor, we don't have a bank credit, we earned all the money we have by ourselves. And so beside the Tanzania thing, we also had a really good cooperation that is running right now. Last years we won the Making a Difference award by Dr. Jane Goodall. I don't know if you guys know her. She's quite of kind of an elder semester. She's one of the, beside David Attenborough or Heinz Sielmann, she's probably the most well-known woman in conservation, in her case for chimps in Tanzania. And she also has projects that are called Roots and Shoots projects, where young people are taught about how to behave properly in environment and conservation stuff like that. And she started in Tanzania. So when we won that award, we got in touch with her, and she really liked the idea of Kipepeo. So we are now going to print T-shirts from her projects, starting in Tanzania with 3 schools, and then hopefully we get into all the other 180 Roots and Shoots projects all around the world. We already have one request from Japan of printing their T-shirts, and one from Australia, which is really nice, but this is still like a future kind of thing. So, as I said in the beginning, when the Kipepeo T-shirts are sold, a part of the revenue is going back to the schools where the designs are actually created. So in the last years, we were able to have kind of a big impact in Tanzania. So here you see one of the graduation shirts we made in the year 2012. This was the year when Vanessa, one of the first students we supported, made her graduation. But in the last years, we were able to do a lot. The first big project we were able to realize was the building of a new kitchen building. It was in the year 2012 when we were at Maxent School, and by then it was rain season, and many of the pupils got sick. And we were wondering why. So there's a big mango tree standing in the standing on the schoolyard of Maxent School. And when the mangoes fall down, they are stored in the kitchen building. And when rain season started, the wind's blowing, and the mangoes somehow got rotten, but you don't really see that they are rotten, and they get eaten anyways. So many of the pupils got sick back at that time. So we thought, okay, it would be great just to have like a proper kitchen building made out of bricks with proper walls. So we started to make a forecast how much T-shirts we need to sell to build like a whole kitchen building, including the costs for the building materials, for the architects, and whatever else, for the roofing and whatever else you needed. And we put that on our website and said, so this is what we want to do. People, just spread the word. We want to sell lots of elephant T-shirts that we can buy in your kitchen building. And it took us exactly 3 months till we were finished, till we were able to finish like a whole kitchen building, including roofing, where we were able to cook our first meal in the year 2012 for the graduation party. And this was kind of a big thing, because it really took us just like 6 months, and there was lots of media attention, especially in Tanzania. So the Prime Minister of Tanzania sent one of his ministers to Maxent's primary school, and they made like a big event for this happening actually, which was on the news in all Tanzania. Here you see Abigail, how she's graduating in the year 2013. And as I said, we are still in contact, and she is now like almost 17 years old. And I'm going to see her, I think, next month when I'm going to Tanzania, as we have to do a workshop about quality expectations in Europe, as we have some troubles with our T-shirts lately. But this is another story. By the end of 2015, we put a power line to Maxent's primary school, as we started building another school building by the end of 2012, which took us like 3 years, which became one of the very first computer classrooms with internet access as at a primary school in Tanzania. So this was basically the biggest project we ever had. And it also was the last one in the last year. We couldn't afford more, but we now start building another school building in 2 months. In 2013, we started to support another project, which was founded by a friend of mine. It's an orphanage in Usa River, which is in the outskirts of Arusha in the direction to Moshi town. And at first we bought some school uniforms for the kids. And then we made the official certification for the school, and then we bought desks and blackboards, And by 2014, we rented a whole new school building where till today 35 pupils are educated for free, and we also pay for the teachers and the medical supply, and for the food, of course. So we won some prizes in the last years. I don't want to talk too much about that. It's just nice if you have them, but it's not too important though. Laura was asking me if I could say something about my experiences being an entrepreneur, and if I have some advice for people who want to found a company. I don't know if any of you have already considered about being self-employed. If yes, raise your hand. Oh my God. Okay, so I was thinking if I actually have some proper advice, and I don't really know if that helps, because I founded my company in a really, really unconventional way, and we are still a small startup company. I now employ 2 people and 3 subcontractors, and it's still growing, but it's still small. But the only advice I have are the following. The first is get a good tax advisor. That's it. It's the most important thing ever. Get a good tax advisor. If you don't have a good tax advisor, everything can get messed up just like pretty soon. The next advice is probably if you need advice, or if you need a coaching or support or a mentor or a business angel or whatever, don't go to these fancy startup events, accelerate programs, whatever. It depends on the business you are running actually, but I would just look for some old retired, I don't know, Swabian engineer if you're a tech startup or something, and ask him for advice, because he will probably know the market better than anyone else. And if people tell you about there's some sort of an event lately which is kind of big in Stuttgart. It's called the Fuck Up Nights. I don't know if you've already attended a Fuck Up Night. It is an event where people go and talk about how they messed up, and that it's basically not a problem if you fail, and it's just about a social thing, that it's just not, I don't know how to say it. It is socially not accepted if you fail, but it's basically not a problem. It is true, of course, and it's not that bad if you don't succeed in your business, but it is not cool to fail. This is just what I want to say. If you fail and you don't have like a secure financial background, a rich family or whatever, and you lose like the first 20, 30 or 50,000 euros, then you are not going to start a company again. It's not like, oh, I failed, now I'm going to make my next startup company. This is just not how it works. You don't get an investment like super easily or something. This is really, really hard work. And if you fail once or twice, it's just the end. Then you go back in a job and you try to pay back the money you lost actually. And the fourth advice, and the last one, which is probably the most important, I think, that I learned when I started employing people. The most important thing is, apart from all the business issues for your employees, family and friends is always first. If one of your employees has some issues, troubles, or whatever, just let him take the time he needs and try to cover up the work that he probably can't fulfill during that time, but don't force people to do stuff in a, I don't know, horrible time of their life. That's it. Yeah.
I would like to ask you, where do you live? Because I can hardly imagine to found a business, or you said that most manufacturing takes part in Tanzania. So do you
Um,
take care of the business?
no, it's not the problem. I live in Stuttgart and I'm in Tanzania twice a year. And one of my colleagues, Francisca, is in Tanzania 3 or 4 times a year. And so we are working together with our Tanzanian partner company, which is the Sunflag company in Arusha. And so we basically just place our orders in Germany and they ship it then to Hamburg, and then we get the t-shirts from the harbor. And when we go to Tanzania, we mostly do like workshops about quality expectations for the European market and stuff like that, because these are actually the issues that are sometimes quite hard to handle. I was chatting to Laura before, and there are some things that are really hard to understand from our point of view, how a product should look like when it's when it went through quality control and shipped to your company. The expectations of the quality of a t-shirts, they totally differ from Tanzanian market to the German market. We sometimes receive t-shirts in a quality where we think, okay, this is just you can't sell them at all. We are somehow lucky that sometimes when we don't check every single t-shirt, because they're usually in shrink bags, and then they just go to the printer and he puts them out and he prints them. And when you fold them afterwards and you see, oh my God, there's a tiny hole, or there's I don't know, a slope thing or whatever, we try to sell them on markets anyways. And we are somehow lucky, which somehow annoys me in from another point of view, that people look at the products and they see that there's a tiny hole in there, and we say, oh, we are sorry, there's a hole in there, and we just saw it now, we get you a new t-shirts, and they're like, oh no, it's made in Africa, right? And we're like, it is made in Africa, but it's made in a company which is manufacturing garments since the year 1965. They are able to manufacture high quality products, and this is just a mistake. This is not Africa. Africa is a country where you can manufacture high quality garments with a total transparent and fair supply chain. They have, it's basically one of the most transparent countries for manufacturing textiles. And this, for me, makes it sometimes hard when this picture of Africa as a poor country that needs help in terms of development and stuff is cemented like all the time. But to get back to the question, I'm in Tanzania twice a year, Francisca like 3 times a year, and what we mostly do is like workshops and stuff, but we don't need to like check on the manufacturing process or something, because the people there, they know exactly how to produce a high quality garment. Mm.
You provide the capital funding for it, but then how is the maintenance and the operating budget for the buildings provided? Does the school take up that responsibility, or do you still also provide for like the upkeep and the maintenance of the new buildings and like the computers and stuff like that?
And for the computers, yes. We have, how do you say that in English, like Fernwartung? Okay, so sorry. So we are able to check the computers and do the updates and stuff from Germany. So we are doing that, and we are now at the moment also we prepare 50 new computers that we send there, because the classes have become bigger. But the school building itself doesn't really need to be maintained. So we paid for the computers, we paid for parts of the building. We also paid for the internet connection, and in Tanzania, you have like a contract with Airtel. That's one of the network providers. So we also pay for the network. So this is basically it. But the building itself doesn't need much maintenance in that case. Yeah.
What's like your main customer group for the t-shirts, and do you think you can expand that indefinitely or to the total population, or it's just that you're serving like a small niche market?
It is.
Buy a t-shirt instead of doing it nationwide.
It is. Yeah. It is a really It's a really tricky question. When I founded Kipepeo, I thought like our customer or our main customers would be like young students traveling the world, sending selfies in Kipepeo shirts. As we did lots of research the last years, we found out the average Kipepeo customer is female in the age of 50 who buys t-shirts for the whole family. So the average basket amount in our online shop is 65 euros. And they mostly buy like 2 or 3 shirts and a bag or something like that. So, for example, these charity shops in Germany, they are really interesting for us as they are already selling our products. There are like 30 charity shops in Germany that sell our products. And we do marketing in magazines and sales channels where other clothing companies just don't do marketing. Like, for example, in Germany it's called the Apothekenrundschau, for example. It's for like a magazine for pharmacies that you find in pharmacies that mostly elder people read. So this is, for example, for us an absolutely interesting magazine to make a commercial in. Excuse me?
Are you also transparent on your cost structure?
No.
Why?
This is it's quite easy to say. To be too transparent is, in my opinion, not always the best way to, I don't know, show your business to potential customers, because people they are not into your business. For example, if in the beginnings we said, for every t-shirt sold, we donate 10% of the sales revenue to school projects in Tanzania. And then people started complaining. Why is it just 10%? Why is it not 100%? And you're like, okay, well, where should I begin? Before we can donate money, we have to pay the cotton farmers. Then we have to pay the spinner. Then we have to pay the guy who is sewing the t-shirt. Then we have to pay taxes. Then we have to pay VAT, and so on and so on and so on. And this is just things people don't really know about. And for example, if we would say we show our cost structure, or for particular in that example with the donations. If there is a bad farming season, for example, in Tanzania, like last year, where we had a decrease of 43% of the cotton harvest in the last year, we had the problem that there was not enough cotton, and we had to buy all cotton we could get at one single point. So this was a moment where we couldn't donate anything at all for the next 4 months, because we have to carry all these costs by ourselves. And if you make that too transparent and you're like, okay, I'm donating 10% for every t-shirt, for example, and you see, oh, they sold like 5,000 t-shirts, but they donated nothing. Why is that? And where do you want to start? Because manufacturing garments is a very, very complex topic, and and managing the supply chain as well. And there are so many different aspects that you have to look on. People wouldn't understand. It's just too difficult to know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think I would like you to explain me. Like, I would like, for example, on the website, like to understand exactly what and so on. So, for example, of course, I do not understand everything that you're doing, like cotton and how exactly it works. But I think if you explain it in a teaching way, I would understand and would be pleased to see where exactly it goes. And I can also understand that you have to pay also the ITs and you have to pay this and this, of course. But
this is just the thing. How can I say it? Doing all, like, if you want to be as transparent as you want a company to be, where do you get the time for doing this? I mean, this takes a lot of time and lots of effort. You have to basically someone has to sit on the computer and just do nothing else than providing like a certain service of showing people how transparent your company is. So we say there are two sections on our website. One is called projects, where you can see all the projects we did in Tanzania for the last 8 years. You can just slide down and you see, oh, there's a computer classroom built, there's a power line built, there we paid school fees for children, but you don't see how much money we spent on that. And on the other side, you also see like the whole manufacturing process. You see that we are the only German company, the only European company that's manufacturing in Tanzania that is certified by the Global Organic Textile Standard, for example, which is the highest standard in textile manufacturing. But if you would go much more into detail, like this money is going here and this budget is going there, it just takes so much effort and so much time. And all three of us, we work like every day between 10 and 14 hours, and you have no idea when you have a business, for example, and we now started to do an autoresponder on Facebook, for example, that basically says, thanks for your message. We can't check Facebook messages all the time. Please contact us by our email address, which is info@kipepeoclothing.com. People are writing like Sunday night and like, I have a question about this and that. Why don't you answer me? And you don't answer because it's just a Sunday night. And then 2 days later, and then the next morning at 8 o'clock, they're like, well, this is not a good service. I still haven't received a reply. And you're just sitting there on a Sunday and you're like, what is going on? So people just keep forgetting about things like that, especially especially on this Facebook kind of thing. We sometimes have people that call us like at Saturday evening at 9 o'clock, asking if they can, if we can ship a garment now that it's there on Monday because Amazon can do it. And you're like, how could we? And this is the same with the transparency thing. It's just people, they want to know a lot, and as soon as you start explaining them, they already have their opinion, and they are not really interested in how it is because they have their opinion, and they're like, oh, okay, this is like this, whatever, I already have my opinion, just let him talk. This is just it.
Regarding these issues, are you afraid of your company growing too big?
Yes.
Are you taking any measures to slow down?
This is the thing is, as we don't have like any investors or business angels or something, we can grow like in the speed we want to grow. So I'm not too afraid of that, but there are some possibilities you have where you need to think, okay, if you, for example, a few months ago we had a request for from a German retailer who was asking for a contract that we can supply them with baby bodies, like a few thousands a month. I was like, well, we could do it, but in case we can't provide the baby jumpers the time they need it because we have a bad cotton harvest, for example. We have to pay them. And this is just like a really, really dangerous thing. So for the moment, we just focus more on the end customer and not on the B2B business. But in the long term, we have to focus on that as well. But before doing that, we absolutely have to talk with our cotton farmers in Tanzania first, that they are able to provide enough cotton for us that we can meet the demand of the market for the B2B business.
Can I ask two follow-up questions?
Yeah.
First one, you don't consider sourcing the cotton from somewhere else, from different countries?
No, it's just the project is that every single step of manufacturing should take place in Tanzania. And by now there are 365,000 tons of cotton harvested in Tanzania every year, and more than 95% leaves the country unprocessed. So the fabric is being made in Asia or somewhere else and then re-imported to Africa, where it's then actually made to a garment. And I think that doesn't make too much sense, especially in terms for organic cotton farming then. As you have like a vertical and transparent supply chain that you can use, you just need to scale things up there in short, medium, and long term. So it doesn't make sense for us to get the cotton from India, for example. like crowdfunding. We actually did a crowdfunding like 3 years ago, but we didn't really pay too much attention to it, to be honest. So we found it like, I think, 15,000 euros or something like that. And I mean, the business is going well, so it sounds strange, but we don't really need crowdfunding at the moment. It would be more interesting for us in terms of marketing. So we are now starting to manufacturing in Kenya as well, for example, as we are supporting a school project in Nairobi, Kenya. And we thought that this could work, do a crowdfunding campaign for this project just to get things started and to get more media attention, for example. But we haven't thought too much about that lately.
I think it's really interesting that you now see a lot of the big textile companies starting to link the purchase of a product to a donation, right? So you have Gap Jeans or whoever, and if you buy a pair of the jeans, they automatically donate some money. And I think in your case, it's interesting that you kind of did it the other way around, right? You created a product to raise money for a good cause. And I think that may also be a really nice mechanism to get people to be willing to donate, right? To support good causes. So do you think what you did is also applicable to other social causes, organizations? They could like create products that they sell to promote the donations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just important when if you think about development work, for example, and especially in East Africa, and you see what happened in the last 60 years, and people send lots and lots of money to wherever in the world, and nothing really happens. So I think the most important thing just is to create work and create proper work in a proper, safe environment where people are paid fair living wages so that they can actually make their living. And in East Africa, for example, for every work created, if you create one workspace, in the following year 2.6 more spaces will be created out of this. So I think the most important thing is invest just like in the existing infrastructure of the companies and just try to make the people live for themselves without relying on foreign donations. There is, for example, there's if you look like Tom's shoes, for example, they started manufacturing in Argentina, I think, as the founder of Tom was in Argentina and he wanted to help the street children, and he started to manufacturing there. And now they moved completely to China, and they are not really a transparent company in my opinion, for example, and they say like buy one, give one. If you buy a pair of shoes, a child gets a pair of shoes, for example. And I think this is also kind of difficult. I was also talking to a guy like 3 years ago or something that I met in Tanzania who wanted to meet up because he wanted to start manufacturing in Tanzania as well. So we met there at the factory, and he said, yes, his business idea is like Tom's. If you buy a T-shirt, then one of the children gets a T-shirt for free. And I said, what for? Why do they need a T-shirt? There's so much garments in East Africa. Why do they need another T-shirt printed with your design? It's just marketing. It's just not...
There was also a lot of discussion whether they need this type of shoes, right?
Exactly.
Because they're not made for
Exactly.
that type.
Exactly. So this is the next thing. And actually, you don't buy from Tom's usually direct. You buy from a shop. So actually, how does this whole procedure work? So and how much can a shoe actually cost in terms of manufacturing costs that they can provide another shoe for free when you buy it from a shop with a kind of big margin? It's weird. No.
And maybe if there are no other questions, I would have one follow-up question. You said that something that you would also give as an advice, don't force people to do some work during like part-times in their life. And given that you are a social business and the primary goal is not to make profits but to support the social cause, would you say that also the way you run your business is a different, is there a different culture behind your business? Is it more about friendship and support and cooperation?
It is.
Startups?
It is indeed. I don't have too much inside view in other startups because I kind of avoided the startup scene in the last years. I sometimes get invited for doing a talk or something, and then I go there and do it, and then I talk to the other startup companies. And I don't know, for me, Kipepeo was always a project that just started with friends, and all people who work for us, we are friends. It's not like employee and chef, for example. It's just like we just work together, we just go out together, we just have a good time together, we travel to Tanzania together. So yeah, maybe it is because it has a social cause, and I'm also pretty sure that you will never get like rich by running a fair fashion label, for example. So I don't really care too much about it. It's just as long as all costs are covered and everyone is happy and we can support our school projects in Tanzania, everything is fine for us. And if we grow like in a speed that we can manage, I'm totally fine. So this is why I found that question really interesting, because we sometimes had some business angels and stuff who contacted us, and they were like, if we give you like 250,000 euros, what would you do? And I was like, I have no idea. not too much different, because it wouldn't make any sense. So does it? So I think it's just, I don't know, sometimes less is more, and just if you be a bit modest about yourself and what you do and just have respect of what you are doing, I think this is fine. You don't need to be like the biggest fair trade fashion company in the world. This is not necessary. You just have to be like a proper, reliable and nice business.
If not, then thank you, Martin, for coming.
Thank you.